pyramid complex was created in Giza, Egypt. It was made out of limestone and granite. It was created there in 2580 to 2560 BC, or the 4th dynasty. Its height is well over 146.7 meters, or 481 feet. 3 generations of rulers, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, each part of the royal family, created a royal mortuary complex that included a temple at the base and a long stone causeway, nearly 1 kilometer in length, leading east from the plateau to a valley temple on the edge of the floodplain. Top was the king's chamber, followed by a gallery chamber leading into the queen's chamber. The Great Pyramids of Egypt were made out of limestone and granite. The ancient Egyptians had to put water on the dry sand in front of the contraption pulling these large stones in order to create the pyramids. This reduced the amount of friction when the Egyptians were pulling these rocks across the desert. This wall painting in front of us shows a man putting water on the dry sand and has ropes attached to the sledge in order to pull these huge boulders across the desert. The ancient Egyptians cut limestone using a technique called ashlar masonry. Gravity would hold the stones together instead of being sealed by an official binding. The shape of the Great Pyramids of Egypt may have been influenced by a sacred stone relic called a benben, shaped like a sacred stone found at Heliopolis. Heliopolis was the center of the sun god cult. The Great Pyramids of Egypt were oriented on a certain point on the compass. This was to ensure that they were pointed in the right direction and were symmetrical to one another in this life and the afterlife. The ancient Egyptian structures were pointed in true north. The ancient Egyptians looked at the star rise in the sky and divide that point in half. This would give them true north. They then placed the pyramids on true north. They created a device made out of wood that would be perpendicular to the layers of the pyramids. This would enable them to stack the stone one after the other on top of one another. They also used the Egyptian sun clock in order to make certain measurements. Mastabas, a small-like cemetery tomb that was placed on the east and west side of the pyramid Khufu and were constructed in a grid-like pattern for prominent members of the court. Being buried near the pharaoh was a great honor and helped to ensure a prized place in the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians believed that life on earth was not only one part of the eternal journey which ended, not in death but in everlasting joy. One was born on earth through the benevolence of the gods and the deities known as the seven Hathors, then decreed one's fate after birth. The soul then went on to live as good a life as it could in the body it had been given for a time. When death came, it was a transition to another realm, where if one were justified by the gods, one would live eternally in paradise, known as the Field of Reeds. The Field of Reeds, the Field of Offerings, known to the Egyptians as Eru, was a mirror image of one's life on earth. The aim of every ancient Egyptian was to make that life worth living eternally, and thus far as the records indicate, they did their very best to achieve that accomplishment. These boats appear to have been used for funerary processions and as ritual objects connected to the last earthly voyage of the king. They then were dismantled and placed within Khufu, Khafre, and Maniker's tombs. These boats helped the pharaoh reach the afterlife. They would create an escape house. This was to make sure Ka could go to the afterlife even if the mortal body deteriorated within the tomb. Next to the causeway leading from Khafre's Valley Temple to the mortuary sits the first truly colossal sculpture in Egyptian history, the Great Sphinx. This close association indicates that this massive depiction of a lion with the head of a king was carved particularly for Khafre. Sphinx was created in 2500 BCE. Made out of limestone, it was a royal symbol well connected with the sun as a symbol of the horizon. The fusion of this powerful animal with the head of the pharaoh was an icon that survived even throughout Egyptian history. The king's head is smaller on scale than the body. This appears to have been due to a defect in the stone, a weakness recognized by sculptors who compensated by the elongated body. The Great Sphinx was carved in situ from a huge rock, which symbolizes the sun god, the body of a lion, and the head of a pharaoh, or god. Sphinx seems to protect the pyramids behind it. Originally brightly painted to stand out within the desert. Cats are a royal animals in ancient Egypt, probably because they saved the grain supply from mice. The head of the Sphinx badly mauled in the Middle Ages. A fragment of the Sphinx beard remains in the British Museum. Believed in the afterlife and wanted the pharaoh to get there. In order to achieve this, they had to build some kind of platform, the pyramid, in order for Ka, the soul, to escape in the afterlife. Smaller pyramids and the Sphinx was built to show the king's strength and have others get into the afterlife. In order for this to happen, they would mummify all of the bodies that were buried within the tombs. Its purpose is to help preserve the bodies of the pharaoh and his people so that they can pass into the afterlife. It also shows the great power of Egypt that it possesses. They would do this by pouring spices and rich jewels on the dead bodies. They would then enclose these bodies into coffins, which would preserve them into the afterlife. The Great Pyramids of Giza are the oldest and largest complexes. It still remains the seven wonders of the ancient world and is one to be remembered. It is largely still intact and is astonishing how amazing these complexes are. The ancient Egyptians was among the earliest civilizations in Africa. Egypt maintained a strikingly unique, complex, and stable culture that influenced later cultures of Europe. Egypt itself came under the influence of Hellenism. For a time, Christianity and later, Christian culture. The Great Pyramids and Sphinx will be remembered as one of the greatest buildings ever constructed in Egypt, known by the pharaohs Khufu, Khafre, and Manikur. Their power will always be seen in the rest of the world. Thank you so much for your time.